A couple of years ago, my friend Danielle and I went to a trade show for the natural and organic industry, and it's a show that I've been going to for over 2 decades. But it was her first time there, and she kept bringing me over to companies who sold mushrooms. She was so passionate about their medicinal qualities that she spent hours talking to the companies about the quality of their mushrooms and how they benefit their customers. Then a few months later, I went to visit her at her home because I was doing a media tour for about menopause education across several states. And she took me to a farmer's market near her house. She was excited because one of the vendors there was selling beautiful, huge mushrooms, many of which he grew himself. He had every variety you could think of: lion's mane, reishi, chaga, maitake, shiitake. And I was very familiar with the health benefits of many of these mushrooms, like cognitive health for lion's mane, immunity for chaga, relaxation and sleep for reishi, and cellular health for maitake. I even hosted a mushroom webinar a couple of years ago for a brand that I was working with. But one area that I wasn't too familiar with, and still I wasn't before today's interview, is psilocybin or psychedelics and how they can help with things like PTSD, depression, anxiety, etc. So today we're diving into the fascinating world of mushrooms. But before I introduce my guest, if you're new to my podcast, I'm Andrea Donsky, a nutritionist for almost 20 years, menopause educator, and menopause researcher. I'm also the co-founder of wearemorphus.com, a company that empowers you to take control of your health and symptoms with nutrition, lifestyle changes, high quality, science backed supplements, and menopause research. And talking about research, I'd be really grateful if you could please fill out our signs and symptoms survey, as we're almost at 5,000 responses, which is very exciting. I put the link below in the show notes so you can access it easily, and it'll literally take you under 1 minute to do. And I have some very exciting news that I'm going to share with all of you about my research in the coming weeks. So be sure to subscribe to my podcast if you're not already. And I'd also be really grateful if you could please rate and review my podcast. If you're getting value from my episodes, and I hope you are, and you're enjoying my content, doing both of those, rating and reviewing it, helps my podcast rise up the ranks in the podcast world. And then that way I can help more women who are going through perimenopause and menopause. So I really, really, really appreciate your help. Today's guest is that friend I was telling you about earlier. Danielle Meitiv is a scientist, health coach, and mom with Hashimoto's. Her journey to healing her own autoimmune condition and her clients led her to discover the incredible benefits of mushrooms, including culinary, medicinal, and even magical. Whether you're curious about their health benefits or just eager to learn more about mushrooms, this episode will open your eyes to the powerful potential of these incredible fungi. Now, here's Danielle. Welcome back to Menopause Reimagined, Danielle.
I'm so excited to be here.
And I know you are because, because we are talking about one of your favorite topics and subjects. And you know what? I actually want you to introduce yourself because our listeners who have listened to our podcast, for our 100+ episodes that we've now had a podcast, we know that you are a thyroid expert, but now you are still a thyroid expert, but you are into mushrooms. And this is something I know you've been talking about for a really long time in your personal journey, but we're now bringing it to the podcast because you are ready to share it with the world. So do a quick intro to who you are and how you got into mushrooms, kind of veering off from the thyroid information.
Right. So I'm so excited to be here, and congratulations on 100+ podcast episodes. And yeah, so we spoke before about thyroid, and I believe we spoke for over 2 hours because I love talking about thyroid health because it is so critical to overall health, to women's health, and especially to women's health at this stage in our lives, menopause and perimenopause. So then why are we talking about mushrooms? Well, or fungus. Let's talk about fungi in general. Because, well, at first I got into this because of my own personal journey. So as I told your listeners the last time, I got into thyroid health and became so obsessed with it because of my own thyroid issues, and that the ones that ran in my family. I have Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Well, I'm very happy to say, though, I am in remission, and we talked about all the things you can do to heal your body. And I'd say I was like 85% there through all the things we've talked about, through the having the right medications and the lifestyle and sleep and stress
Diet.
management. And of course, the most important, of course, being nutrition and diet. And like I said, I was almost there. I felt, worlds better and so on. But I just was missing that last piece, like that resiliency. I felt like there was no gas in the tank. Like I just, staying up a few nights late, jet lag, getting a cold. And I wouldn't completely crash the way I used to, but I would get these flares. And so I kept digging deeper, going, what is it? What's the missing link? What's the key to really helping my body heal? Now, I want to be clear, there's no cure for an autoimmune illness. If I were to drop the things I do, eat crap food and all that, I would go right back into full flare, high antibodies, and so on. So I still have to maintain all of that. But what was the missing link? Well, one thing we know is that the link between autoimmune illness and childhood trauma, or any kind of really deep trauma, is like the link between lung cancer and smoking. They really are that tightly linked. And I want to be clear, this isn't a blame thing. This isn't like, okay, now you're broken. It's a really huge causal factor. We talk about things called ACE scores, which are adverse childhood events, that really do set the body up to be more susceptible to autoimmunity. And the reason why is that if you grew up with a stressful childhood, you've had trauma, either traumas, you lost a parent, there was alcoholism, or ongoing traumas like poverty, systemic racism, things that really made you on alert all the time. Well, your immune system's on alert all the time. And so your immune system becomes hypervigilant. And that hypervigilant, that always looking for a problem, always looking for the enemy, can then turn on you and become autoimmunity. So it's not like a negative, your body is trying to protect you, but that hypervigilance, which could be turned on by abusive parents, alcoholism in the family, losing a parent, extreme poverty, that same hypervigilance then can result in autoimmunity.
So everything you mentioned, sorry to interrupt, but everything you mentioned is all like, that's like big T trauma, but can it also be brought on by small T trauma?
And I'm so glad you said that. So just to clarify what Andrew's talking about, for example, there's a number of amazing researchers. And of course, Andrew's own mother is a trauma expert. And we talk about big T trauma, meaning losing a parent, sexual assault, something, a war, right? That we can all point to and go, wow, that's a traumatic event. But when we talk about small T trauma, it's like the ongoing background things that we often sort of dismiss. We don't realize. Oh, Gabor Mate, an amazing writer and physician and researcher on trauma, talks about trauma can be things that happen to you that shouldn't have, or things that didn't happen that should have. You didn't have adequate food. You didn't have parents who could focus. And it could be not because they were abusive, but because they were wrapped up in their own trauma struggles. So the small T is the things you didn't get, the kind of ongoing background traumas. And that's really more what I suffered. There was no one thing. I had parents that had a lot of trauma themselves, and they transferred that to me, not deliberately. They weren't abusive. I, love my parents, but they just couldn't parent the way a child needed. And so I had that small T trauma running through my background, and it manifested in autoimmune illness. So I have Hashimoto's and I have celiac. And so I was looking for, the more I dug into this, I thought, well, great, it's not like I can go back and change the past. So what do I do? Well, it ends up there are ways that we can heal the present day, right? We can't change what happened, but we can change our body and brain's reaction. And I'm going to get back to the brain's reaction in particular to trauma in the present. And a great definition of trauma that also comes from Dr. Gabor Mate is trauma is a lack of reactive flexibility. That we're not, and you can also think of autoimmunity like that, or any kind of allergy, right? You're not reacting to what's going on in the moment. Your brain is seeing what's going on in the moment and playing a tape from a long time ago. And sort of the most stereotypical example is someone who has, say, PTSD from war, might hear a car backfiring, not a traumatic event, but their brain hears a bomb going off, right? So they're not reacting with appropriate flexibility to the situation. Oh, that's a car or a firework or something. They're locked into their past reaction.
Triggering.
And they're triggered. Exactly. And their brain, the sort of, I don't want to say primitive, but the most basic, I'd say protective part of our brain, it's there to make sure that you're never in the path of a bomb going off again. So a good example is better to react to a rope on the ground as if it's a snake than to not react and find out later it was a snake, right? Like you
Right.
think of it that way, your body goes, overreacting. With autoimmunity, it's the same thing. Your body sees a particle, like, what is this thing? We're going to react to it. It's a gluten. It's a protein in bread. It's not dangerous, but your body reacts to it. Or ragweed pollen, right? Your body overreacts. It's not reacting appropriately. Instead, there's some hypersensitivity that's causing an overreaction. Emotional trauma works the same way. And because your body reacts to stress, all stresses are the same, whether it's, fighting with your spouse or, abuse as a child or breaking a leg or having an illness, your body increases the white blood cell count, increases the vigilance, is all those things. Cortisol goes up. When you have emotional trauma, it overactivates the immune system. And so you get chronic inflammation. And we see that. In fact, more and more, they're starting to believe that things like anxiety and depression, we don't know if it's the chicken or the egg, but you can see inflammation in the brain.
Yeah.
So in fact, things that can reduce brain inflammation can actually help mood, all kinds of mood disorders and all kinds of mood illnesses. So that's how I got really into, again, from my own journey about 5 years ago. So just digging deep into what is my own trauma and how do I heal it? And what do we know about healing trauma? Not just masking it, not just feeling better, not just positive thinking, but actually healing trauma so that I get that reactive flexibility back again. And my own body and mind are reacting to the present and not replaying a tape from a long time ago. So that's how I got into really caring about trauma and deep healing and how the body can really use certain techniques and certain nutrients and substances and so on to heal itself. And so that's where the interest in mushrooms came from. And then, we'll get into all kinds of mushrooms. But, the spoiler alert, the mushrooms some of the mushrooms that are really the deepest healers we're learning psychedelic substances. Well, psychedelics in general, but psychedelic mushrooms are the ones that I've learned more about. So we're going to talk about those magic mushrooms as part of all this. But it's not just the magic mushrooms that have such incredible benefits. I've also completely geeked out on all kinds of medicinal mushrooms. And then before I was saying fungus, because in fact, we're not necessarily always talking about mushrooms, and there is a difference between the two. It's like talking about plants versus flowers, right? Fungus is the entire kingdom of organisms we're talking about. And the fruiting body, the part that is produced in order to reproduce the organism, is the mushroom. And not all fungus produce mushrooms, but all mushrooms come from fungus.
Got it. I understand.
Right.
Well, I'm happy that you said we're going to talk about the different types because, you like the magic mushrooms, the psychedelics, the psilocybin, like there's so many. And then you've got like the medicinal mushrooms. So let's break it down with the definitions. I think that's a good place to start because many of us aren't familiar with the different types.
Right. So just going back to what I was saying before, so fungus is its own kingdom. It's not a plant, it's not an animal. It's its own. We often think of mushrooms as like vegetables because you put them in a soup or you put, when we think of culinary mushrooms, but in fact, it's a completely separate kingdom. And in fact, animals are more closely related to fungus than we are to plants. The common ancestor of that split off from, there's plants split off here, it's photosynthesizing and so on. And then that common ancestor later split into what would become the fungal kingdom and the animal kingdom. So in fact, we are genetically, evolutionarily more closely related to fungus. And that actually has implications for why they are so beneficial for us. So fungus is, like I said, its own kingdom. We've all seen fungus a million times, turn over a log and all those little white threads you see breaking down, right? Or, when a house, we say this house is rotting often, or this wood is rotting, you'll see those little white fibers going through it. Those fibers are called mycelium. If you, dig in, literally there are hundreds of miles of mycelium under your feet every day, thousands of miles. It's funny, they say that like, the original like World Wide Web is actually mycelium because mycelium also connect trees to each other. And that's how trees communicate they exchange nutrients between trees and between mushrooms and trees. And so underground the earth is absolutely permeated with these mycelium. And mycelium is really like the main form of the organism. Like I said, we see the mushrooms that pop up, but that's like saying here, you know, the trees, like I said, the main form of the organism, and once a year it produces flowers when it wants to reproduce. Same thing. Mushrooms are what we call the fruiting body. They come up and they spread spores, which
So
are
you think of
kind of
mycelium like the roots in a way, like that's sort
yeah.
of.
Well, it's especially because it's underground, but it's almost as if, imagine if the entire tree was underground and the only thing that ever popped up were the flowers of the tree. That's really what you're thinking, is like the entire organism is underground.
Okay.
And so we can eat both mushrooms and mycelium depending on what we're using them for. So in terms of the mushrooms, we all know what mushrooms are, right? We think of the button mushrooms, we think of crimini and portobello and like shiitake and all these, right? Those are delicious. And I have to encourage everyone to think of mushrooms as an entire food group that you should incorporate into your diet daily. I mean, the benefits of mushrooms are unbelievable.
We have to add it. We have to have them added to the food guide.
Yeah, seriously, like it's its own like food group.
Seriously, right?
And
Like
part of the
exactly.
reason, yeah, is when you think about mushrooms grow in the ground. And when you dig up leaves, right, we all smell mold, which by the way is related, right? Mold is related, more closely related to fungus, or to mushrooms. And but underground, that mycelium, they have to fight bacteria, they have to fight viruses, and they have to fight other kinds of mold. Well, all those compounds that help fight bacteria, we can then eat, and then they help us fight. So the different kinds of mushrooms have been found to have incredible antibacterial properties, antiviral properties, incredible benefits for immune health, for gut health, for skin health, for hair health, for hormonal health, for brain health. The research is mind-boggling. And so and then of course, you know, there's just general health. My kids take, you know, mushroom capsules every day. I put it in my coffee every day. I'm going to show you some examples of medicinal / culinary mushrooms that are part of my dinner tonight. But I really want to highlight the incredible benefits, and the research is coming out more and more on the benefits of mushrooms for women's health in general, and especially during perimenopause and menopause. And give me one sec once this app decides to open up again.
Which I'm excited about, that we're going to talk about. And, you know, you just mentioned before we talk about the perimenopause and menopause component, it sounds counterintuitive when you think about fungus and mold and then ingesting it and how it fights off other, like, explain a little bit about that, because we hear so much about mycotoxins and mold toxicity. Like,
right.
I just want you to talk a little bit about that.
So in fact, you hear that mycotoxin, right? We talk about mycelium. There's a reason. Those are absolutely related to one another. Like we said, that's the same, like, larger kingdom. So, but you have to think about it this way. Well, penicillin, incredibly beneficial bacteria. You know, E. coli, not beneficial bacteria, right? So there really are, just because they're in the same category, doesn't mean that one is, they're all harmful, right? So, and like I was saying, part of the reason why these mushrooms are so beneficial is that the mushrooms themselves, basically what we're doing is we're taking the mushroom's immune system and immune factors, and we're incorporating into us so that we could use it. Just like, again, the reason why penicillin is so powerful is that penicillin is a mold. Actually, I should say that's not a bacterium. Penicillin itself is a mold that penicillin, or it's a bread mold that itself fights bacteria, not to help us, but to protect the penicillin mold. That's what is fighting the bacteria. And so we go, oh, okay, well, if penicillin molds can fight bacteria, if we eat the penicillin, well, now we're fighting the same bacteria. So it's really is, so I should correct what I said earlier, right? Penicillin is a mold, but the analogy is like, we have like lactobacillus in our gut, which is healthy, right? We like lactobacillus and bifidus and all these probiotics that we eat, but we're not going to eat E. coli because it's not a healthy bacteria.
So it's just a different type. I understand.
It's totally different, right? Exactly. Some things are good for us, some, are going to be toxic.
Okay.
So, and in fact, we found that there's various mushrooms you can eat to help fight bacteria, to help fight fungus, to help fight all kinds of infections, to both boost our own immune system's ability to do it, as well as to also literally ingest compounds that can help. And here, I'll give you an example. So I wanted to show this. So this is something, this happens to be just one brand. It's AHCC. It's a particular compound that has been isolated from shiitake mushrooms. There is growing evidence that this has unbelievable antiviral properties. I'm using it just because the winter, I have it with my kids, viruses, but also my Hashimoto's came from Epstein-Barr virus. So I want to just maintain a good antiviral immune system, right? The research on this, though, that's coming out that's amazing is they're finding that 6 months worth of taking this mushroom, and it would be like 3 grams a day. Just to give you an idea, that would be 4 of these capsules because each one is about 750. So not a ton, 4 grams a day, fighting drug resistant cancer causing HPV infections.
How would you know? And this is going to veer for a second, but how do you know? So for those who are listening right now, be like, how do you know that your Hashimoto's was caused by Epstein-Barr? Like how would
Right,
somebody know that? I mean, I know you can get a blood test. I actually had a blood test for
right.
Epstein-Barr. So I know you can get a blood test, but are most
For me,
autoimmune.
it's even, and I think what we're going to find is the research is showing, like we talk about autoimmunity. So I said that you need to have the adverse experiences in order to create the immune system hypersensitivity or hypervigilance, but there often has to be a trigger and a biological trigger. And for me, it was Epstein-Barr virus. And I know because I had mono freshman year in college, which is caused by the Epstein-Barr virus. COVID has been shown to cause, like extreme COVID can cause, if they have people have a strong reaction to it. Yersinia enterocolitis, which is a gut infection, H. pylori infections. So these various infections, that viral and bacterial infections that hype up the immune system and put it on high alert can trigger that hypervigilance. So I know because I know when I had mono, and I know another emotionally traumatic events, and then I started having Hashimoto symptoms when I was 23. Didn't know it was Hashimoto's at the time. Now I understand that because we knew nothing about it at the time in 1992.
Yeah.
But so we do know, like I said, that we don't have cures for viruses. That's why we take vaccines, because we don't have cures. We're actually finding that this is literally ridding women's bodies of HPV. And we're talking about the strains that cause cancer, that can cause cervical cancer. And this is a mushroom extract from shiitake mushrooms that's doing it. So the research is unbelievable. Turkey tail has been shown to have incredible anti-cancer benefits. Unbelievable. Like and there's examples, Paul Stamets, who's an incredibly dedicated, brilliant mycologist and the founder of Host Defense. I'll show you some of those products later, and just an amazing researcher and mushroom benefactor. His mother was given 6 months to live with breast cancer, with terminal stage 4 breast cancer. She started taking 8 capsules of turkey tail a day, and she's still with us. And that was 8 years ago.
I was just with the director of marketing sales from Host Defense. I don't even think I told you I was with.
Oh wait,
I
gotta hear all about it.
I know. I forgot to tell you, but I told her all about you. I was with her at a conference last week. We were at this conference for.
I'm such a Host Defense groupie.
I know you love them. So we were at an event and we were ziplining. They took us on a day trip to do networking.
You don't take me in.
It was a really cool event. And she was in my group. We were only 5 of us in the group. And I think halfway through, I'm like, oh, where do you work? And she was like, Host Defense. And I was like, oh my gosh, my friend Danielle would love you right now.
Oh my God.
So I forgot to tell you that. She told me.
Here's Paul Stamets, his gourmet medicinal mushrooms. And here's his mycelium running book.
I know you love him. And so, okay.
He's so sweet.
So let's go back to this for a second. So it sounds like to me that mushrooms have so many different benefits. So they've got the antiviral benefits. Can you're saying anti-cancer. Is that something that is in the research that is showing that? So I just want to make sure that
everything I'm telling you is all real. I mean, there are, when we get into the psychedelic mushrooms, I mean, the research is still really solid, but it's so, given all the paranoia about it around, especially in the United States, but around the world, drug culture, it's just starting to reemerge again. But everything I'm going to tell you is backed by research. As you know, you and I are the geeks that always want to talk about the research. I'll also talk to you about some of the anecdotal stuff. In other words, some of the stuff, because I want to just be clear, like N of 1, like the anecdote of my mom did this, or like I said, Paul Stamets' mother, that's an anecdote, right? But it's still, anecdotes often give scientists ideas for studies, right? And when you get together enough anecdotes, like thousands of them, well, that's data, right? You know what I mean? Like it is data. It's not.
Well, I love that you're a scientist. So that's why, I'm just, you're.
No, this is why we love talking. And I dug into all the great, I was telling Andrea earlier when preparing for this, that I was just geeking out. I was going down every little rabbit I finally ended like, okay, go back. Like, let's
I know
just.
you love, I mean, the reason Danielle and I get along so well is because we just love data. And she has a scientist background, which is what I love about
Yeah,
you is, if there's something that I don't understand, I'm like,
right,
Danielle, read this. Tell me, am I
right.
understanding this correctly? So I
Well,
love
we
that.
both
Okay.
love data, and we both shop at Whole Foods when we go to conferences together.
Exactly. Okay. So
All right.
so let's go back for a second. So the anti-cancer properties, the antiviral properties, what are
Oh,
some other incredible
holy
benefits?
moly. Okay. So, okay, immune support, right? That's the antiviral, anti-cancer, like all kinds of ways to support the immune system. We also know they have incredible anti-inflammatory effects overall, which is also calming down the immune system. We know that, so there's, which also, like I said, right, we know that there's things like depression, anxiety, OCD cause inflammation in the brain. So it helps calm that inflammation. But in addition to the immune system, we know it helps gut health. We know it, I'm going to go into this. It's going to talk about bone health, about sleep quality. And the thing that's probably getting the most attention are the neurological benefits of some of these mushrooms. And so I'm going to talk about that as well. Not just neurological as in protective or reducing inflammation, but actually stimulating the brain to grow new neurons, to
New neurons,
actually
BDNF.
grow and support the brain. And
Okay.
so exactly to promote brain derived neurotropic factor, which is incredible. We're
BDNF.
talking about improving memory. They're studying it for Alzheimer's, for Parkinson's, for multiple sclerosis, for all kinds of literally for traumatic brain injury. Literally, for the longest time, we thought the brain could not regrow neurons, and now we're finding even in adulthood, it's not actually. I should qualify that it's not necessarily growing new neurons. I just listened to a fantastic podcast about this. It is more like if you a neuron, if you think about what a neuron looks like. So I'll tell you, okay, so imagine this is like a neuron. This end is this big bulb, right? This is called the dendrite. This end is
You
kind of
have
like
to
a bulb.
explain it
And
because
this, right, I
for
was gonna
those who are
say this,
listening on the
imagine this is what a
podcast.
neuron looks like. Right, okay, I wanna say,
So,
I'm holding my hand up with my finger stretched out. So if you imagine one end is where you have these little branches that reach out to another nerve. And those, imagine like little tentacles, they don't touch each other, they reach out towards each other. And we're talking about hundreds of them, not like an octopus, but lots of these tentacles. And the space between those is called the synapse. And in between, so nerves, you've probably heard that use electricity. They literally, electrical impulse runs along the nerve, but it doesn't like just zap across like when, you zap your friend, when you're a kid on the, static. There's chemicals in between that allow the electrical impulse to travel from one nerve to the next. And those chemicals are called neurotransmitters because they literally transmit information from one nerve to the other. What those little branches called dendrites, what these medicinal mushrooms appear to do, and also psychedelic mushrooms can help with it, is they literally help. Imagine those dendrites being like a tree. They help that tree get bushier. Lots of little spikes coming off that. So now that same, rather than having, just a certain number of branches, now it has lots of tiny little branches reaching even more nerves, because we think of them in a line, but in fact, of course, your brain is three-dimensional. So we've got nerves reaching, horizontally, vertically, sideways, diagonally in all three dimensions. So what, for example, the research is showing suggests that psilocybin mushrooms do is they actually help those dendrites, those branches, become even branchier, so that they're communicating even more powerfully with the nerves around them and connecting to even more nerves in the brain. So it increases the connectivity of the brain. And what that means, when you're increasing the nerve connections, you're learning, right? We're learning, we're growing, we're reinforcing things, whether it's, but it's not just learning new thoughts, although that's part of it. It does enhance the learning. They're finding that, for example, it actually can improve motor reflexes. So, God, but we're jumping all over because I'm so excited about this, right? So let's take a step back. The mushrooms, some of the mushrooms we're talking about, since we're on the brain health, I'm going to go into the mushrooms let's talk about brain health, and then we've got lots of other things to talk about. So one of the lion's mane, I say one of the most popular mushrooms that people know about, and it's here as lion's mane. So first I'll introduce you, this is my friend lion's mane, Leo the lion's mane.
Leo the lion's mane, I like that. Danielle loves her props the way I love my props.
I love my props. Right,
you can come watch this on YouTube, by the way, if you're listening on podcast.
Exactly right. Sorry, you can, right, exactly.
We'll have the link below.
A fuzzy little lion's mane with hands and feet and little glasses. It's very cute.
I like it. Yeah, you can watch it on YouTube, and we'll put the link.
And then And then to people who are watching, I'm holding up literally a lion's mane mushroom. This is one I
It's
got
such
at the
a
farmer's
beautiful
market. It's
mushroom. It's
beautiful.
like,
They
it
call it
looks
lion's mane.
hairy.
It looks
It's
like
kind of,
white fur, like white
and it
lion's
looks like
mane.
a brain. Look how it's shaped.
It's kind of cool. You're right. Exactly. It's so you can
It
see
looks
this
like
is
a
where it was
brain.
attached to the growing substrate. Although my son actually did find a lion's mane in the woods. Big disclaimer. Do not ever pick or consume a mushroom you find in the woods unless you are an expert or you are with an expert. My son actually knows what lion's mane looks like, and it's such a distinct one that he got it. We brought it home, and we asked somebody else who knows, is this lion's mane? And it was, because mushrooms have such powerful compounds in them. Some of them can absolutely be poisonous and very deadly poison. So don't ever pick a mushroom from your
Good
lawn,
advice.
from the woods, anywhere.
Yeah.
This lion's mane I got from the farmer's market, and they grew it. The people, they're wonderful people at the farmer's market. They grow the mushrooms. So I'm going to literally cook this tonight.
So just to be clear, these are medicinal mushrooms, which are
They're often
different.
called, right.
Yeah, go ahead. They're
I was
often
gonna say,
called.
right, I'm saying they're called, right, there's a group of mushrooms called medicinal mushrooms. They overlap with culinary, like one of the popular medicinal mushrooms, and also I'm showing this on the video, is shiitake. Right, people have heard shiitake many times. It's very popular in Asian cuisines. It's also considered a medicinal mushroom and has been used in traditional Chinese medicine for thousands of years.
And this
So
is
when I
different
talk,
from psychedelic mushrooms, which
exactly,
is psilocybin, which we'll talk about after.
which we'll definitely talk about, right?
Okay.
So lion's mane is one of those. It's Hericium arenaceus. Is that arenaceus? Yep, is lion's mane mushroom, and lion's mane has been shown in many studies to have neuroprotective and cognition enhancing effects. Like I said, helping those nerves branch out. It's synaptogenic, which means it creates new connections between nerves. It is neurogenic, it's actually helping the nerves grow. It is neuroprotective. There's new research that suggests that lion's mane actually is helping to repair the myelin sheath. Imagine like if your nerve has like, like you have insulation around wires, the myelin sheath is the insulation around your nerves that is often degraded or damaged with multiple sclerosis. Lion's mane is showing that is showing promise to help do that, to help repair it. So lion's mane is incredible. It's also been shown, it promotes brain cell growth, nerve regeneration, and healing. So for traumatic brain injury, again, Alzheimer's, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, and so on. It's found to reduce depression, anxiety, again, because it's literally healing the brain, reducing inflammation, promoting the neurotransmitters that are often depleted in depression. It's also found, it also has gut boosting benefits, as well as just anti-inflammatory. So like lion's mane is phenomenal. I take lion's mane every day in a couple of different ways, and I'll explain that as well. So lion's mane is my first, like if people like, I want to start with lion's mane. If you want the brain. So actually it's really hard to say that. My other favorite one we're going to talk about next. So lion's mane. So lion's mane. So I've had top 4 for women in menopause. There's like 10 I could talk about. The top 4 medicinal ones we'll talk about. And then
okay, so we got lion's mane number 1.
Lion's mane, right. And
I'm gonna guess number 2.
Tied for first. Tied for first is, of course, what's my favorite?
Reishi. Are you gonna say reishi?
So reishi is known as the elixir of longevity in traditional Chinese medicine. It's been used for over 2,000 years. Yeah, reishi is phenomenal. Immune support and immunoregulation. Remember, we were talking about the immune system is hypervigilant autoimmunity. Calm it down, not shut it off. We don't want to suppress the immune system. Modulate its effects. So it helps to regulate the immune system.
And helps us cope better with stress and its adaptation.
Anti-inflammatory, oxidative stress, improves sleep. But let's talk about some of the specifics for both reishi and lion's mane. Okay, so they found that reishi has been particularly effective for reducing the duration and just occurrence of hot flashes and night sweats. So it improves sleep. And so they think it may be due to, this is reishi's ability to modulate hormones. So it actually is helping to balance out, right? We get these, right in the middle of the night, it's the estrogen, progesterone, like too much, too little. Reishi helps modulate that. So there's evidence.
So to be clear, it doesn't affect it by raising hormones. It just helps to balance it out.
Right. Okay. So here I'll tell you specifically, a study published in the Journal of Maritas in 2012 found that reishi supplementation significantly reduced the frequency and severity of hot flashes and night sweats in perimenopausal and postmenopausal women compared to a placebo.
Amazing.
So that's the hot flashes. Reishi may also help support bone health. And as we know, lower estrogen means that can actually affect can increase osteoporosis risk because we
one
need
of the big
estrogen
three.
in order to help. Right.
Yeah, as we go into
So,
this. Yeah.
2015 study in the journal Molecules looked at the effects of reishi on bone health. The researchers found that reishi polysaccharides promoted osteoblast differentiation and inhibited osteoclast formation. So what osteoblasts are the cells that make bone cells, and osteoclasts are the cells that reabsorb bone cells. So our body reabsorbs damaged bones. It actually promotes osteoblast activity and modulates, right? We don't want to turn off osteoclast because we need to break down damaged bone, but modulates it so that it's not, because a lack of estrogen does the opposite. It suppresses bone osteoblast, bone formation, and increases bone breakdown.
That's what an adaptogen does. It helps to modulate, right? So yeah, which is why we.
And then also reishi, a study in 2016 suggests that reishi can also help reduce cholesterol, which is also an issue when we talk about blood sugar regulation, hormonal issues. We talked about that with thyroid health. Often when we have low thyroid hormone, we have higher LDL. Reishi can help reduce cholesterol. So those are specifically studies for reishi and menopause. And let's talk about specifically about lion's mane and menopause. So there's a study in phytotherapy research that lion's mane reduced anxiety and depression, and we know both of those issues, moodiness, irritability, depression, anxiety, right, restlessness, all that lion's mane can help with, specifically in menopausal women. And then has again neuroprotective effects. Women are at a higher risk for dementia, much higher risk. 2/3 of Alzheimer's patients are women. And one of the reasons why they think that's so is that the precipitous drop in estrogen leaves the brain vulnerable. The brain relies on estrogen and needs estrogen for brain health. And so when estrogen drops, our risk of dementia and Alzheimer's goes up. I say, okay, Alzheimer's is one specific disease that causes dementia. So I'm using them kind of interchangeably, but dementia is right.
Yeah.
And like I said, we know that lion's mane has both neuroprotective effects and has actually helps with neuronal growth, right? So can actually protect the brain from dementia. And then also we know that some of the beta glucans, which are some of the compounds in lion's mane, help the immune system. And we know that again, drop in estrogen makes women's immune systems more vulnerable, or shifts in hormones, which is why women are most likely to get autoimmune illnesses at puberty, pregnancy, and menopause. Shifts in hormones make us more vulnerable to autoimmunity. Again, both lion's mane and reishi have immunomodulating effects. So very specific benefits for women in menopause. But wait, there's more. So let me
two more. I want to hear them.
We got 2 more favors, and then let me tell you, there's lots more, but we'll just start with those 4. So these are the ones that I take every day, these 3. And although I think I'm going to end number 4 just because now that I've done the research, I'm like, okay, fine, I'm going to end another one. Not that you have to twist my arm. I love these mushrooms, right? It's cordyceps. Now, I'll tell people, anybody here who watched, it might be like, why does that sound familiar? Well, if you watched The Last of Us, you've heard the term cordyceps, the zombie mushroom. No, that is not what's going to happen. Although it was a fantastic show. And let me tell you, if you didn't already have a crush on, Pablo Pascal, you will after that damn show. But yeah, so good. But anyway, cordyceps not going to eat your brain. But it is called the zombie mushroom because cordyceps do actually grow in caterpillars and ants. And but when these guys are not, you can also make them just these are not grown from caterpillars, so they are vegan entirely. No insects involved in this process. But so cordyceps are also phenomenal. And recently my son is he's already taking an IC on lion's mane, and now I got my kids geeking out. He's like, Mom, you got to get me cordyceps. I'm like, yeah, I guess you do. I do. One, cordyceps has been shown to boost energy levels. So, I mean,
number 1 symptom.
I don't think I've ever met a menopausal woman or a thyroid patient who is not dealing with energy issues. So cordyceps, amazing. Okay. Also another amazing one. So it's also been shown to regulate hormone levels, including estrogen, testosterone. A 2010 study in the Journal of Alternative Complementary Medicine found that cordyceps help regulate estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone levels in perimenopausal women. So that study was specifically perimenopausal women, cordyceps.
Wow, amazing.
Cordyceps may also help improve energy levels and reduce fatigue. Again, in Ethnopharmacology, Journal of Ethnopharmacology, 2015 demonstrated cordyceps' ability to improve physical fatigue and enhance energy levels in older adults. So menopausal and postmenopausal women. And also cordyceps And these are just these are just the few studies. I didn't want to like give you, there's literally dozens and dozens and dozens of studies on
Wow.
each one of these, hundreds at this point. I just want to give you like a taste of them. Cardioprotective health benefits, helps protect blood vessels, moderate blood pressure, which is of course, again, very important for postmenopausal women because drop in estrogen makes our heart more vulnerable. So
one of the big three.
so far we have lion's mane, reishi, and cordyceps. The one, and also I will tell you the other thing that that reishi is not here in this, I mean, the benefit that you and I have discussed, and there is definitely research, is, like I said, in traditional Chinese medicine, reishi is known as the elixir of long life or the elixir of longevity. It is also very well known in Chinese medicine as a sexual stimulant and as for sexual health and for libido, for sexual performance, for libido. I am not shy to say, I have definitely noticed a difference with reishi. Vaginal dryness, right? Literally sensitivity. I mean, these are real issues. Reishi has made a huge difference. So, so I definitely recommend reishi also for sexual health. So like the ones my kids are taking right now, not for other reasons, obviously not menopause, reishi and lion's mane, my son's like, I need to add cordyceps. And then,
and the fourth one?
then the fourth one is maitake. And some of the people may know this. It's also known as chicken of the woods. I always get chicken, hen of the woods, sorry. Hen of the woods, chicken of the woods, hen of the woods. It grows here in the Northeast as well. So lion's mane and maitake, I have seen in the woods with, you know, experienced mushroom foragers. Again, don't do this at home. Maitake has been known to regulate blood sugar and insulin sensitivity, reduces high blood pressure and cholesterol, boosts the immune system, potential powerful anti-cancer benefits, and specifically research into managing menopausal symptoms. So it's been found that it helped improve hot flashes and night sweats in postmenopausal women. So this was research in the Journal of Medicinal Foods. So again, these are benefits, you know, anyone in your family can benefit from these, but these four are powerhouses for women in menopause: lion's mane, reishi, cordyceps, and maitake. I'm just going to name a few others that you might have heard. Turkey tail is one people might have heard of, and it's that's like I said, the anti-cancer benefits, very potent anti-cancer benefits. Chaga, also very strong antioxidant effects, great for gut health, among many other things. Also may help liver health.
And immune system.
And the immune system, right? Shiitake mushrooms, as I was saying before, powerful as a source of vitamin D. It's powerful immune function, especially in older adults. So again, that includes postmenopausal women. And I said again, shiitake, many of us, you know, you can buy shiitake in almost any store now. So those are a few others. And then I told you about the shiitake, the extract of shiitake that has very powerful antiviral properties. And then agarikon is another very powerful immune booster. But so those are some of the like well-known mushrooms.
So how can we get these mushrooms? So we can obviously eat them, like you were saying, you were going to have lion's mane for dinner. But how do you recommend that we get it so that it has its benefits?
So whenever we're talking about these mushrooms, let me be clear, we are talking about eating them, right? These are mushroom foods. We're not like isolating one compound from shiitake mushrooms. Oh, I mean, there's one case where they're doing that, and that's very specific medicinal use, you know, to fight viral infections. But for the most part, you want to eat the whole food. You want to eat the mushroom. And like, as we said earlier, I literally got a mushroom. I got shiitake and lion's mane at the farmer's market, and I'm going to make a dish with it tonight. I'm going to have it with pasta and, you know, clams and basil. My kids love it. And garlic. I can also, my farmer's market has maitake mushrooms, which is, so you can get lion's mane, you can make take. Cordyceps is not, because it's not the way it's grown, you're not likely to find it in a farmer's market. You might, that's one you probably want to get, is like, you can get mushroom powders and so on. And the same thing with reishi, because reishi is actually like a bracket fungus that grows on a tree. So those two you're going to get in capsules or powders or so on. So all of these are available, like I said, in powders. People often add them to their coffee. They're available in capsules, which is how my kids like them. You can get tinctures of them. But my preference, as I showed you before, my little props here, is the food source. So like I said, lion's mane and so on. So you really can, and there's no, I mean, any amount is good for you, right? Like the studies are like 100 milligrams, 3,000 milligrams, you know, and so on. But these have incredible benefits, period. So I just encourage. Now
And they taste delicious.
They're amazing, right? They're delicious. And pretty much we're talking about medicinal mushrooms that have been used in Chinese medicine and doing research. Mushrooms, period, right? Mushrooms are phenomenal for you. The only caveat I would say is the white button mushrooms, the ones you see everywhere. I wouldn't recommend eating them raw. It ends up they have a carcinogen in them. So the white ones you want to cook, but
the white button ones you're talking
white buttons, ones you see everywhere, best cooked.
Okay, so don't eat the white button mushrooms raw. And what about the brown ones? Because there's the white and then the brown, same thing.
Like, no, we think the white button ones. Other ones, I would say you're just like most foods. The thing is, mushrooms have like some tough, proteins in them, or elements in them, or compounds in them. They're going to, first of all, they're going to taste better sauteed. A little bit of butter or olive oil, right? Oh my God, right? So literally, people like, how do I make mushrooms? Slice them up, olive oil, garlic, salt. I mean, like the smell of mushrooms in my house is like, my kids are always like, what are you making? Like, it's so good.
I make a delicious cauliflower rice mushroom risotto. It's all vegan, and I use like vegan cheese. It is, and
okay, you gotta share that recipe.
I will. It's actually going to be in my book, which I'm so excited to share.
Oh my God, I'm so excited.
But I will share it with you. So my husband works in produce, so I'm always like, can you bring home? And he brings me home like all these, like this plethora of mushrooms. So, and
oh my gosh, and you mean literally, like I'm talking about the ones that these are fancy and the research and medicinal. Pretty much people can consider any mushroom that you see in the farmer's market, you see in the produce aisle, medicinal. You want to try crimini, popino. This time of year is chanterelles. Like I've had chanterelles, like very expensive, but like they're the farm. Morels. You've heard truffles. Mushrooms have incredible benefits. So if you're in the farmer's market and you're like, oh, well, they don't have shiitake, but they have portobello. Great, get portobello, saute those. They're going to be, they have amazing benefits. Like I tell you, I'm geeking out on the ones that are like fancy medicinal ones, mushrooms, and mushrooms.
I love how you tied the research to perimenopause and menopause, which is obviously what our podcast is about. Okay, I want to talk about psychedelics because this is.
You want to talk about talk about psychedelics? So for those people watching the podcast, watching it on YouTube, I'm showing you my arm for Mother's Day. I gave myself at 54 a tattoo. I have a psychedelic mushroom tattooed on my left
and it's
inner forearm.
Huge.
It's like 4 inches. Like it's not tiny, right? This is not like the cute little no. Anybody who looks at me is gonna be like, "What's that on your arm?"
A massive psychedelic mushroom on her inner arm, which is hilarious. So you have to go watch that on YouTube. That's how much.
You have to go see it, folks. There it is. This is me.
That's how much she loves mushrooms. Okay, so let's talk about psychedelics. So, obviously I've heard about it and, psilocybin, and I know it's becoming legal in certain places, but I know it, and I know it can help with PTSD and trauma and all of that stuff you were talking about. So give us a little bit of a background on it, how you would do it. Obviously, in certain places you can, certain places you can't. So talk a little bit about it. And then there's the microdosing, and then tell me.
You and I, we could do a 2-hour podcast just on psychedelics, but I will try to bring myself in. Okay, so like I said, the way I got into first learning about mushrooms and like this whole path was in trauma healing. And it's the research on psychedelics is mind-boggling. Which is kind of funny, mind-blowing. Sorry. But yeah, so first psychedelic, literally the word means mind manifesting, psychedelic. And people think of psychedelics as like drug culture in the 70s and dropout and so on. I want to really emphasize, like first we're talking about broad psychedelics, and then I'll talk specifically about mushrooms. First of all, psychedelics has been used by humans since we've been human. Psychedelic mushrooms in particular grow all over the world. We know there's many, many, many varieties of psychedelic mushrooms that grow in Africa, where we all evolved, and they grow out of certain varieties grow out of animal manure. So you can imagine our 2 to 4 limb walking ancestors following a bunch of herds of animals. Cow patty, mushroom. Ooh, what's this? Right. So there's something actually called the stoned ape theory that theorizes, and I don't think it's that far, not that hard to imagine, that our brain evolution was actually influenced by consumption of these psychedelics. Just so we know, our teeth evolution was influenced by what we ate, right? And our, brain size was influenced by what we ate. Why wouldn't our brain function be influenced by these very, very common accessible mushrooms? So psychedelics overall is a class of compounds that have certain effects on the brain, and they mostly affect a bunch of different neurotransmitter receptors, but the most common, the ones at least I'm going to talk about, are the 5-HTP2A serotonin receptor, and that is probably the responsible for a lot of what we think of as the classic psychedelic effects. So psilocybin affects that receptor, LSD affects that receptor, DMT, which is what's in ayahuasca. You've heard of ayahuasca, that affects that receptor. There's other psychoactive compounds and there's other receptors, but that's the biggest impact is effective. To give people an idea of that, the effect of, now I'm going to talk specifically psilocybin. When we think of that serotonin receptor, that's the receptor that's targeted by classic antidepressants, SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, right? The serotonin is right in there. That's the receptor it's targeting. Psilocybin, sorry, I should say psilocin, which is the compound that your body converts psilocybin into. Psilocin has 1,000 times greater affinity for that receptor than an SSRI, than say Prozac. Wow. 1,000 times greater affinity means it will bind more, tighter, longer, etc. And so, but it doesn't, unlike the SSRIs, it doesn't just inhibit the reuptake. It's not like, oh, your body makes a certain amount of serotonin, but it's going to stick around longer. Psilocybin and its derivative psilocin actually increases the production of serotonin in the brain. So you actually get a lot more serotonin activity. And that is, for the most part, like a lot of the quote psychedelic effects of psilocybin. So I'm going to tell you this as well. So we say, well, why do you want to affect that? And people very nervous about taking psychedelics. Well, the reason why there's so much attention to psychedelics in general and psilocybin mushrooms specifically is that these compounds were originally studied before the whole drug war shut it down by psychiatrists. There were hundreds of studies on psychedelics for PTSD, depression, anxiety, OCD, schizophrenia, all of these things, because they have really powerful brain healing effects. For example, there's a study, now I live in Maryland, Johns Hopkins University is one of the leading research institutes. The state of Maryland just gave, last year, millions of dollars to Johns Hopkins to study specifically psilocybin for treatment-resistant PTSD. Because, for example, a few studies have found that 1 or 2 doses of psilocybin mushrooms given, either one dose or one and then another one given 2 weeks apart, 65% of the people who had treatment-resistant PTSD, which means nothing else worked, 65% of them no longer could be diagnosed with PTSD after just 1 or 2 doses of psilocybin mushrooms. 65%.
That's incredible.
Gone, cured, healed. The brain has been fixed. So this is why there's not a single other treatment that can do that. And so that we have found that, for example, here I'll talk about specifically, a 2020 pilot study found that a single dose of psilocybin improved anxiety, depression, and quality of life in a sample of women going through menopause. This was studied in the Journal of Psychoactive Drugs. Each woman took a single dose at 2 and 4 weeks post-treatment. The women reported significant reductions of depression and anxiety and improvement in quality of life measures. But the study I was talking about, PTSD, they contacted people 6 months and a year later, and they still did not have symptoms of PTSD. So we're literally talking about curing it.
So is this something that you have to do with a professional? So talk about the legalities, because
So this is the weird space we're in right now.
Okay.
In the United States, I can only talk about the law in the United States.
Yeah.
Right. The US right now, psilocybin is considered a Schedule I substance, which by definition means there is no known medical benefit. Heroin is a Schedule I substance. Cocaine is a Schedule I substance. So it's a Schedule I substance, no known medical benefit. The same FDA just a few years ago said that psilocybin actually has called it a breakthrough treatment because it has such promise for mental health. And the FDA itself is helping to design studies. So it's both has no medical benefits, right? And right, exactly. And it's very much politics. And in fact, yesterday, the FDA just rejected MDMA, another psychedelic, for treatment of PTSD. And part of their panel criticized the way the study was designed. The FDA helps design the study. There's just crazy politics. In the United States, there's a huge bipartisan effort to get psychedelics legalized for PTSD. Tons of law enforcement and military veterans, who are the people very likely with PTSD, are behind the push to legalize them. Tons of politics. Psilocybin and these drugs were made illegal in the 1970s as part of Nixon's war against drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just coming out of that. And there's a lot of sort of
Right.
drug culture bias and confusion about it. And it's just not true. Psilocybin is not toxic. It is not addictive. You literally cannot overdose on psilocybin because, like, remember I said, you have to convert psilocybin to psilocin. Your body will just stop converting it. You'll just pee out psilocybin. Your body will be like, nope, no thanks, I'm done. Unlike something like alcohol, well, you can overdose. Alcohol is a toxin, and the more that goes into your body, the worse it gets.
Or other
Psilocybin
forms.
is not a toxin. It is actually beneficial to the body. It helps. Like I said, psilocybin itself has been shown to help. Like I said, all those benefits of lion's mane, psilocybin, 1,000 times more. Help with neurogenesis, neuroprotection. Remember that, like synaptogenesis, the branching of neurons. And recent research, and right now it's just been proven, shown in animal models, but there are 124 clinical studies in the US alone on psilocybin right now, going on, meaning studies that are going on right now. They found that psilocybin appears to reopen what they call the social learning period in the brain. We always talk about children can learn anything from languages to what, like, their brains are just open to learning because literally their brains are growing, and that's why they can learn. When we learn, literally, we're laying down new neural pathways. We've always thought that that closes. That's why it's hard to, for example, learn a language as an adult. Well, there's some evidence, again, right now in animal models and lots of anecdotal evidence, that psilocybin can actually help reopen that. And I might be experimenting with that with my French studies right now.
That's
So
amazing.
it's unbelievable. And again, no side effects. Like, now, if you take psilocybin, look, psilocybin is a psychedelic, and you've heard of people having trips. Psilocybin, LSD, all these things at a larger dose does give you this, like, drug journey trip experience where a sort of your perspective on reality. They're talking about ego death, which sounds worse than it is. It means this sense, less of a sense of yourself as separate, but rather a sense of oneness with everything, different perspectives, which is part of the reason why they think it helps the PTSD, is it literally helps people have a different, more for spiritual experience of themselves and their connection to the world. Doesn't have to be religious, although many religious people have said that they've had their most spiritual experience under psychedelics, but just rather than, if you've ever been depressed or anxious, that feeling of being like, you're so caught up in your problems, in your world, you want to break out of it, but you can't, right? You literally can't see that the sun is beautiful or the flowers. You're so trapped in that, and it's a prison. It's horrible.
It's horrible.
This helps open up that prison and go, oh, it's not just, and I don't mean not just about me and like somebody being selfish, but in the like, oh, I am connected to people, and there is a bigger world, and it's beautiful and wonderful. And this is what, it's interesting, the other word for these compounds is called entheogens. And internal, theo, God, gen, manifesting, literally manifesting the feeling of divinity or connectedness from within. And again, you don't have to be religious to do, right? It's this sense of like oneness with everything. And so at larger doses, so when we're talking about PTSD, they're talking about those doses where somebody is having that experience. I do not recommend ever doing that, especially when you're not experienced, if you on your own, ever. I'll tell you, I have absolutely done that. I've had numerous journey experiences. I'm always with somebody else, and I'm with somebody who's experienced. I've worked with therapists, I've worked with shamans, but like, you want to have at minimum a trip sitter, somebody who knows what's going on. Right. Also, just because it helps enhance the experience, but also if you feel anxious, if you feel there's somebody there, because the brain resists letting go of reality, like letting go and opening up. And you might be like, feel a little anxious. Oh, here's somebody who's not on the medicine to sit with me, and so on. So that's at the higher doses. That's what we call, I would call a journey dose or a trip dose. I'll use this for example, if you were literally taking mushrooms, which, by the way, sorry, we didn't talk about legality. The state of Oregon has legalized them for therapeutic uses. They've been decriminalized in New York, in Washington, D.C., which is why, by the way, I can talk about this. Washington, D.C. is a block away from me, so I've taken them right the block that way, where they are legal or decriminalized. There's a number of places where I believe Somerville, Massachusetts has decriminalized them, which means that law enforcement authorities will not enforce or will deprioritize enforcement of their illegality. They're going to look the other way because these are living things. Like you're growing. Like, how can you outlaw a mushroom? By the way, mushrooms, psilocybin mushrooms can grow out of like cow patties. You know, Paul Stamets talks about in his podcast, like literally driving by, you know, past a farm and he sees psilocybin growing out of cow patties because what are you going to make it illegal? It's right there. Nobody planted it.
Right.
It's in the cow patty. Like,
Well, I think it's like anything. Like I remember CBD too was also
exactly.
like,
And I live
and
in
it,
Maryland where now cannabis is completely legal. It started as medicinal, and just a year ago, it became totally recreational legal. I mean,
yeah,
I
in
could buy it
Canada,
a block and a
national,
half that way.
yeah, in
Yeah.
Canada, it's legal as well, like cannabis. So it's more like I think the laws just have to catch up, and you
And
know,
it's the same way. We know that the reason why is they're like, oh, it's illegal, but the reason why cannabis became medicinally legal and then recreationally legal is because people demanded it. And why they demanded it? Because they were experimenting themselves in an underground economy and it worked. And so they demanded legality. And that's what's going to happen. We just, this past session, this spring, the Maryland legislature just passed unanimously passed a law asking for a task force on how to legalize like grow, you know, plants and fungus. So ayahuasca, you know, psilocybin, you know, mushrooms, things that grow, like as opposed to MDMA, which is a chemical made in a lab, or LSD, which is made in a lab.
right,
They're saying like, if cannabis plants are legal, why shouldn't mushrooms be legal?
right. Why is it different? So the
So it's
law has to
probably going to be a
catch it.
state by state thing in the
Yeah.
United States. Like I said, that's what happened in DC, where they decriminalized it.
So talk about the
So
microdosing.
yeah, so like I said, those are the larger doses, and those you only want to do with supervision. But I mean, honestly, highly recommend it for trauma and so on. For and also, by the way, in the United States, you can also legally get it because it is considered a sacrament. They have a number of groups, and also, as we know, we have the First Amendment protections for religion. There is a very long history of using mushrooms, ayahuasca, peyote, and so on in religious ceremonies. And now, so a way, honestly, people, it's a loophole, right? People are, if the government is going to stand the way, people are going to go around it. Where you can get these things as a sacrament as part of your religious or spiritual path. Again, don't do this at home, kids, like by yourself. It's just, it's not fun, and it's not necessarily, now be clear, it's not unsafe. It's not like when somebody's drunk, they can get in a car. That is really not how people act on psychedelics. They're not going to jump off buildings. They're not going to hit anybody. It's more like you might feel lonely or anxious or scared on your own because you aren't, it helps you access deep emotions. You don't want to go there by yourself. If you want to deal with trauma, do it with a professional, do it with someone who knows what they're doing.
And I
So
remember as a teenager, sorry to interrupt you. I remember as a
yeah,
teenager, like when you are taking these I remember like I think we were 16 and my friend had like this mushroom party and we were drinking mushroom tea. I didn't do it actually. I left. I was too much of a chicken. I'm so like straight and narrow, but I remember
next
they were
time we
doing,
get together, we'll go to
I know,
DC, you and me.
I know they were anyways, but I know from what I heard or what I was like, what I guess what made me so nervous is like it can last for like 6 hours and it's like this whole trip. So I was like, yeah, not for me.
Well,
So
I'm glad you mentioned that. So if you took 3 to 5 grams, which is like the journey dose, like 5 grams is the upper end, like 5 grams, what they call a hero's dose. Not hero because you're heroic, but like the hero's journey, it's ego death and like,
yeah.
discovering the new you and all that. That's a journey dose, and that can last 6 to 8 hours. Smaller doses. So let's talk about the other end of and since I've become very familiar with these mushrooms and I know how to use them, and I facilitate journeys for people and so on. I understand how to use them in between. There's also, I talk about medium doses and mini doses for different uses, but let's go all the way to the other end, microdoses, which is a phenomenal way to be introduced to this. So a microdose is a 10th to a 20th of, so 5 to 10% of the larger dose. So what I would say is, or even smaller. So you may have heard like the moms who microdose or myco mama, like it's been in like the Washington Post, the New York Times, and so on, like women doing this. I can tell you from experience, holy moly, microdosing is phenomenal for you, for your brain health. So it means taking a very small amount, what we call a sub-perceptual dose, meaning you don't feel it. There's no trippiness. You don't even know, like, it's not even like, oh, I had a sip of wine and I feel a little mellow. You don't, people want to start with it, you don't know, but it is still having brain boosting effects. So remember earlier I was saying any amount of mushrooms, like eat it for dinner or take a powder, whichever one. Obviously, there's different effects at different amounts. It'll still help the brain, and it's cumulative.
Okay.
So take about 100 milligrams or 0.1 grams. When I work with people, some people take 150 milligrams. So I coach people on how to do this. Again, I'm not going to tell you to take an illegal substance, right? But if people want to understand how to do this, again, I live right next to DC, so if it's legal, they can, I can help them find that. And also, frankly, you can find places to get it, but, and I know them, but they will take, I follow what's called the Stamets stack. Again, our friend Paul Stamets. And I also recommend that people do that. It's where you take it for 4 days. You take 100 milligrams for 4 days and then take 3 days off and then start the next week with 4 days and 3 days. Some people decide they want to do 5 and 2. That also works. But I mean, especially if you want more, like I know someone who's taking for dementia, for example, or traumatic brain injury. I just do 4 and 3. There you take the Stamets stack is taking 100 milligrams of psilocybin mushrooms, just powdered in. I take it in a capsule. You can put in a tea. You can. I know people put it in in eggs. Like they literally cut up mushrooms and put them in eggs, right? Like saute them. Then 500 milligrams of lion's mane with it, same time, because lion's mane we said amazing for brain health. And then 15 minutes later, take a flush form of niacin, the kind that makes your face red, which makes your face red because it's a powerful vasodilator, opens up your blood vessels, and delivers the psilocybin and lion's mane to the brain faster. But some people are uncomfortable with that because it can be an uncomfortable, like sunburny, hot flash kind of feeling. But so I do that 4 days a week. And the benefits, I mean, again, the research is amazing. For example, remember we said that psilocybin has 1,000 times greater potency, like larger dose potency, affinity for those serotonin receptors. Even if you take 1/10 of it, okay, now it has 100 times the 100 times the benefit, right? So it has a greater affinity for those serotonin receptors than even the most powerful SSRI, right? Anti-anxiety effects, anti-depressive effects, helps with brain fog, helps with focus, helps with energy. I have clients who are taking it. I have some working on anxiety, some just want the, who are just, in their 40s and 50s and just want the brain health benefits. I have 2 clients who have dementia. I have, one who has early cognitive decline, wanted it for his mother with dementia. I just heard, so some of the reports are incredible. So the person I told who's taking it for mild cognitive decline, he said his brain feels like it's on for the first time in years. He's noticing he's more alert. He's just remembering things better. The guy whose mother is taking it, she's 81 years old. He said she'd just been taking it for a week. She slept through the night for the first time in ages, had a fantastic night's sleep, and her mood was just, she felt calm. She felt upbeat. This was after just 1 week of microdosing. I can tell you for myself, I was like, I just want the benefits. I just want, I've been doing my Duolingo French because I was a French major a gazillion years ago. I'm like, it's insane how fast words I know I have not thought of in, I kid you not, 25 years pop into my head. I'm like, what the, like, it's crazy. But this, I don't think I told you this. I realized this just a few days ago. So I started it 4 weeks ago. I take, I have ADHD and I take Vyvanse, but I take a tiny dose of it. Like the normal dose, like 40 to 70 milligrams. I would take like 10. And I started taking it consistently. Because occasionally, like I used to be like, oh, I'll take it if I need to work, but maybe I won't. But I said, let me feel, no, it feels like if I took it consistently for a while. Then I was like, you know what? I'm going to hold off while I'm doing the microdosing. The other day, I was like, I got up early, went to the gym, did this, I'm doing, okay. And then I looked, so funny, I looked over at my end table and I saw the Vyvanse, which is just sitting there because I've been taking it. And I was like, I feel like I've taken like a mega, like, wait, I haven't taken ADHD medication in weeks. And I am productive and focused. And I was like, oh my God, this is the microdosing. Like, this is the microdose. I couldn't believe it. And again, so it wasn't like I was taking it for ADHD and therefore I was expecting it placebo. It didn't even occur to me that it was for ADHD. Like, I just thought, when I said I didn't want to take it, I just thought, oh, I'm taking something in the morning. I just don't want to, like, I don't know, the Vyvanse interact, they're both brain things. So I was just like, let me just not take it and deal with the ADHD kind of thing. Like, I just didn't want to take too many things. I was like, oh my God, I don't have to. And I've heard many reports of microdosing for ADHD.
Can you take it? So again, just to be clear, so it has to be legal for the state that you're in or the country that you're in order even to do the microdosing, correct? As I just want to be clear, or
Well, I'm not going to tell people what to take, like whether or not, right? To be perfectly honest, overwhelmingly, the psychedelic movement is happening underground and it is happening illegally. I mean, that's just to be perfectly honest, right? Like journey doses and so on are not legal in most places. Actually, there's nowhere in the United States where it is fully legal for somebody to walk into a store, buy 5 grams of mushrooms, and somebody say, "Okay, I'll sit with you." Like it's just. However, like I said, in Washington D.C., the police, like many cannabis dispensaries, are selling mushrooms openly, little bags, and the police are certainly not raiding them. Right.
Okay.
That said, the overwhelming number of people who are microdosing are not doing it legally because the laws have not caught up. So it's not dangerous, but it is potentially illegal. So again, I'm not advocating that somebody do something illegal, like that is your own risk. I've taken on certain risks myself that I'm comfortable with, but everybody has to decide that for themselves. But like with cannabis, like when people were dying of HIV and they took cannabis for their appetite, it wasn't legal then, but they were desperate for it. And those people are the reason why it's legal today, right? Like except I think this is moving even faster because when people were taking cannabis for anxiety, for autoimmunity, for illness, and so on, there weren't hundreds of studies supporting cannabis. At this point, there are thousands of studies supporting psychedelics in general and psilocybin. And like I said, almost 130 studies going on right now in the United States, specifically for psilocybin.
Incredible.
So we're already like the research. And so I've just read a great article in Rolling Stone saying that literally it's the underground economy that is going to force the government's hand because there's billions of dollars being spent on psychedelics and especially psilocybin right now, like billions of dollars in the underground economy, just like for cannabis. So
it would make sense for them to legalize it because then they can get in on the
right. I mean, what are they gonna do? Arrest like moms at home trying to like microdosing because they're stressed out over kids and work? Like, you'd be arresting most of my neighborhood, I'm pretty sure, when it was before cannabis and now right. Something, right? And again, I want to point out that like the legality and again, people take different risks in terms of the legal risk. That is a risk, and that's a risk you have to decide whether or not you want to take. In terms of the biological risk, there's no known toxicity. Literally, if we're talking about the difference between taking a Prozac, like Valium, but how about a glass of wine?
Right.
This has lower toxicity, no toxicity. This is good for your brain, unlike alcohol. Now, look, I'm not saying people want to take a glass of wine, everybody's choice, right? But alcohol is a toxin. Your body is going to treat alcohol like a toxin. I had to give up alcohol like an occasion. I must have like one drink a month, and that's just because I happen to be out with people.
I had to give it up in menopause. I can't even.
I pretty much have given it up. When I say one a month, I mean maybe. Like I'll have like a half a glass of prosecco if I'm at somebody's house, and then I'll be up in the middle of the night, right? Like
no,
my body clearly does not want alcohol.
So Danielle, I want you to summarize before we end the podcast. Just summarize what we talked about. So we talked about the medicinal mushrooms, which is the lion's mane, the reishi, the cordyceps, and the maitake. I think it was the maitake, right?
Those are the top 4 for menopause.
The top 4.
I say 5. We're going to add psilocybin.
Add psilocybin, and then we've got the magic or the psychedelic mushrooms, which is the psilocybin, which is psilocybin, right?
Right.
Which is what you're talking.
Psilocybe is the genus name. That's
so if somebody, for those, and a lot of, I've been hearing about this for a while, and I've been hearing about it, from you, but also from other people who've been talking about it, how it really does help with PTSD and, anxiety and all of these things.
Depression, OCD, all that.
OCD, all of that, which, oh my gosh, if, that's a whole other podcast with my OCD and all the anxiety and that's a whole other thing.
We're going to see each other in October. We'll talk.
I have to come to Washington. I have to come to Washington.
That's right. That's right.
So I guess my question is, and this is something where I'd like you to talk more about, is like, so how can people find out more? I know now you are, you can help people, you can coach people. How can people, if they want to learn more about the journeys or they want to learn more about psilocybin, psychedelics in general, how could they reach out to you?
So, okay, I will definitely, like I said, put in the show notes. I am now starting to do coaching where I talk to people about, like, again, whether or not what you decide to do, legality and so on is your choice. But I can talk about not only, so when I talk to people about like neuroprotective benefits and dementia and so on, anti-anxiety, right? You and I are all about nutrition. I want to be very clear to people, right? This is not a magic pill. Like you can't eat a ton of processed sugar and a ton of crap and a ton of alcohol. Oh, and by the way, psilocybin is going to make it all
Yeah,
great.
you always have to do
I
your
talk to people
research.
about their B vitamins, about their omegas, about their E, about their, right? Well, we're talking about E and omegas. I know somebody who makes really good E and omega.
Yeah, called Morphus, Toco
Smartness,
E.
hello, Togo E and omega, like which I take as I have a drawer for my kids take. Anyway, this is part of a holistic approach, right? And that's why I love doing it. As a health coach, I talk to people about holistic health. I talked to one young woman, for example, who wanted to microdose for anxiety. Well, she was 27 years old. We talked about her health was phenomenal. Like she had a great diet, but she had been on, had been on oral birth control for years for her periods. She had just gotten off, and I said, okay, well, let's talk about gut health because your body, serotonin is used in the brain. So the brain makes serotonin, but the entire body needs serotonin actually as an anti-inflammatory, among other things. And that serotonin is made in your gut. So for muscle health, for migraines, for anxiety, you need adequate serotonin. That's made in the gut. If you have oral birth control, that depletes the minerals and vitamins that are needed to make serotonin in your gut. It can damage your gut bacteria. So here I am talking about microdosing, but I'm also like, let's talk about taking a B complex. Let's talk about taking omegas. Let's talk about your gut health. Let's talk about how much fiber you're eating, right? Like this is about comprehensively. Well, I don't say when somebody comes to me, I don't say this is a microdose consultation. It is a holistic wellness consultation. We're going to talk about mental, emotional, physical health all together because we talk about mind, body, but as you know, I always love saying this up here, I'm tapping my head here, is a big hunk of your body, right? Your brain is a piece of flesh, right? It needs the same nutrition and the same health, right? It's not like up from the head up, from the neck up. It's like somehow, like we only need, air and spirituality. No, we actually need nutrition for our brain, right? The brain's the hungriest part of the body. So when I'm talking to people about depression, anxiety, I'm going to talk about their diet. I'm going to talk to them about about processed foods and sugar and, blood sugar spikes. And we can talk about things like, again, cholesterol. Remember, some of those mushrooms not only do have brain benefits, they have anti-cholesterol benefits. We're going to talk about your blood pressure. We'll talk about your sleep, right? All of these things. So,
the holistic approach. Hey,
exactly. It's a holistic approach.
Everything is interconnected, everything.
Exactly. So this is the kind of consultations I'm offering. I'm offering holistic wellness consultations where, among other things, we can talk about the benefits of psilocybin mushrooms and how that might fit into microdosing, might fit into a larger mental, emotional, brain health, body health, approach to wellness. And so you can show that link. And I can talk to people about, there are places where you can get it. There are places where it's legal. There are places where it's decriminalized. It's moving fast. So
you just give the information.
There's 75 bills right now pending in various states about legalizing mushrooms. So
wow. So you're the encyclopedia of this information. So you could reach out to Danielle.
If I don't know it, I'll find it.
You'll find it exactly.
I will go look it up.
You will. So how could they reach out to you, Danielle? I'm going to put it in the show notes, but how could people reach out to you?
Right. So I am at Thyroid Healing Solutions. Right now, I don't have a link there, but I'm working on my website. The best way is I can just give a link to the wellness, through my Practice Better, but also you can always email me, Danielle at thyroidhealingsolutions.com. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok at at thyroid.coach.danielle. So TikTok and Instagram. If you want to talk about mushrooms, you can also DM me in those places. Like I said, you can email me in those places. And I am, as my own journey has evolved and my own interest has evolved, you'll start seeing this more in my TikToks and Instagram and on my website. It's just literally happening. I kid you not, I got 8 clients in 3 weeks. And by the way, you want to talk about how sort of cutting edge people. I now have 3 therapists who are referring clients to me. Oh, and the one I told you, the mild cognitive decline, that's the husband of my former therapist. Like these, like mental health
Amazing.
professionals who are like,
They
and
see the
I have
benefits.
a psychiatrist who wants to start referring people to me for anxiety
That's
because
amazing.
she is frustrated that she doesn't want to just give people. I mean, listen, there's absolutely a place. I do not want to, I mean, anti-anxiety medication, antidepressants, they can be lifesavers. So one, I want to be very clear. I am not telling anybody to stop taking those medications. Absolutely not. You
Yeah, it
can
didn't
talk to
come
your
across like that
provider.
at all. So you don't have to
Right.
worry.
Great. You can talk to your provider about weaning off, about doing both and so on. Um, but literally there are sometimes it's just not appropriate for it. And so I literally have a psychiatrist friend who wants to start referring clients to me for microdosing and learning about microdosing. Like that's how much mental health professionals are, like so many of them are so excited about psychedelics because we are not talking about masking symptoms or drugs that, okay, you're not depressed, but you also don't feel anything, right? Like it masks symptoms, it dampens your, we're talking about things that literally heal the brain. And I'm not
Amazing.
exaggerating, I'm not kidding. You can look, there's a great podcast recently, interview with Paul Stamets on the Joe Rogan podcast. There's the Andy Huberman podcast. You want to say also, you want to just people like, they want to learn from me, we can go reach out to me. Great. I mean, seriously, put psilocybin into ChatGPT, into Google, and you will just be like overwhelmed with the amount of and it's
Amazing.
showing up places like Good Housekeeping. Like we're talking Reader's Digest. Like we're not talking, this is not like,
Yeah. It's
the New York
everywhere
Times, the
now.
Washington Post, the Daily News. I mean, everywhere people are talking about this. It's
Yeah.
the government that's really needs to catch up. So
And they will. It
it'll
just, they're
happen.
always,
It will.
it always takes longer. Danielle, thank you for doing this. It was very eye-opening
Yay.
and I learned a lot. So I'm happy that
Yay.
you were on the podcast and I appreciate it.
I always love talking to you about this and can't wait to see you.
I
Yay.
can't wait to see you too very soon, very soon. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Danielle and you learned a lot about culinary, magical, and medicinal mushrooms. If you did enjoy it, please share it because the more you share shows you care. And please rate and review our podcast because when you do, it pushes it out to more people so we can help more women in perimenopause and menopause. Thank you for spending the last hour and a bit with me. I know there's a lot you can be doing, but you chose to spend it with me. And for that, I am grateful. See you at the next interview.